In this course, we're going to begin talking about dealing with difficult people. This ties in with previous courses very nicely, especially performance management. And during this course, we're going to talk about helping you develop the knowledge and skills to transform a situation, a conversation, into something that's more constructive. But most importantly, you've got to gain the confidence to have the conversation, not avoid the conversation. And during this course, we're going to provide you with some skills and ideas and approaches that will give you more confidence to go have some difficult conversations with difficult people, because dealing with difficult people will absolutely differ from person to person, and whether they're a direct report or employee, a peer, or a boss. We're going to talk about all those different aspects of the people you interact with. So, key points during this course. Studies have suggested that employees tend to prefer corrective feedback over positive feedback. That's counterintuitive. But year after year, study after study, people want to know how they can improve, which is that constructive feedback, or sometimes deemed as negative feedback. So you've got to get yourself mentally over the concern that you might have of hurting someone's feelings, eroding a relationship, because your team really wants that feedback. They want to get better. Think about it from your own perspective as a manager. If you had an area of opportunity for improvement, what do you want to know about that? What do you want your boss or your manager to tell you? Hey, yeah, why don't you start working more on this? Or I saw you doing this, let's get that fixed. There's an open dialogue that is required and asked for by employees and others. So take advantage of it. The conduit is there, the openness is there. Very often what holds us back is our own mindset around being hesitant or afraid to give constructive feedback. According to Gallup, only 28% of people this was out of thousands of people that they surveyed, only 28% of the people receive feedback a few times a year, while 19% say they receive it once or less a year. Wow, 28%, only a third are receiving some kind of feedback on a regular basis. That, of course, mathematically leaves over 70% of folks out there working, maybe for you, likely for you, that is not getting the feedback, positive or negative, developmental or constructive, that they require, they request, that they want in order to get better at their jobs. You can't get better unless somebody tells me how to get better and what to get better at. So part of this problem is that these performance conversations are stressful. And again, like I said earlier, they tend to be avoided. And throughout this course on dealing with difficult people, we're encouraging you. In fact, if you want to change the narrative, change the relationship, make difficult people less difficult, you've got to have the conversation. You've got to become more courageous in having the discussions with individuals that may be creating some difficulty with you. Now, people do get defensive, and the mood can turn, and relationships can be damaged if approached the wrong way. And that's some of the skills and the tools we're going to provide during this course to help you avoid creating that kind of environment. But I can tell you this, and you've experienced yourself, I am certain that by delaying giving this feedback, that can lead to a big disconnection between you and your direct reports. And it also can erode the perspective of leadership that they have in you. You appear disinterested, avoidant, and that is not a great leadership viewpoint or one that you want to be judged by. So we're going to look at the critical issue of handling difficult people correctly. All of this has been tried, tested, and implemented by myself and the rest of the results-driven leadership team. We've done this for years. We know it works. We're not sharing with you theoretical approaches to this. This is how we, as leaders of large and small teams, have created the best practices and the approaches that we know work more often than they don't. Because we knew in our own careers that caving into destructive behaviors, well, that led us nowhere. By sticking our head in the sand and expecting it to fix itself, it never fixed itself. It only made the situation or even the person worse. It's a sure way of sabotaging your career. If you want to continue to advance in your leadership role and your management role within your organization, it's going to be critical that you embrace the skill sets that you're going to learn in this course in dealing with difficult people. So let's move to this. Think about the most difficult leader you ever worked with, difficult boss you've ever had. And what made that person difficult? Was it the frequency of communication, how they were saying things that were destructive to you, that they avoided or never told you where you stood? Could it be that they were rude, that they just did not give you the level of communication that you were looking for? And how many times in your career would you have preferred that you knew that you were doing something wrong or could have improved in something versus not knowing? You always want to know that. You know you do. So don't allow this to happen, because every employee and your peers, by the way, and your boss, they're judging you. It's like you're in your own reality show with a camera following you around all day, every day. And people are watching you, and it's a little overwhelming sometimes to think about this, but they're watching you and judging you. They're watching your actions, they're listening to your words, and they're determining what level of leadership and respect they're giving you based on your actions, words, activities. And if you've got somebody that's displaying poor or difficult behavior and you're not doing something with it in the eyes of your peers and your direct reports, well, you're losing the leadership respect for that. Every day that's undermining you. And putting your head in the sand and avoiding difficult conversations, like I said earlier, it's not going to fix itself. You've got to deal with it. And you've got the component of erosion of respect by those around you by not dealing with it. That should be your motivation for developing the courageousness to go confront and have the right kind of conversations, because you're being judged every day. Every minute you allow difficult behaviors to exist in the workplace, it's leading to this erosion of the respect for you. And I think that should be motivation enough to go and have the gumption to have the right conversations. But it really is, we avoid those conversations because we often don't know how to have those conversations. That's what this course is all about. But your employees are asking themselves over and over again, if you're not dealing with it, when are you going to deal with it? Why are they letting this person get away with it? Are they not seeing this? They can't understand why this person's getting away with what they're getting away with, and you're not working with it. They detest working with these kind of people, but you're, in essence, every day you avoid it, you're allowing it. The more you avoid it, you're just given permission in the minds of your direct reports and peers. You're given permission for this person to be difficult and to misbehave in the workplace. And that's certainly not what you want as a manager or a leader. So You may be asking yourself, why is this person acting like this? Well, I've got some frank feedback for you on that, because you're allowing them to. That's what you've got to absolutely embrace and understand, that that's how you're going to be viewed. That's how you're going to be judged by others in the workplace, is if you're letting this happen and you're not dealing with it, regardless of why they're behaving that way. You'll never really figure it out. People are going to be people, but I can tell you they're going to continue on that path until you do something about it. You cannot allow these folks to go on. Every day you ignore it, you're giving them permission. Please keep that in mind throughout these discussions on difficult people. So let's talk about some different forms of difficult people. I'm going to give you the most common. Certainly I'm not going to be able to provide every single type of difficult person, but I'm going to give you an overview of the different types and some tips on how to deal with the different types of difficult people. So the selective performer, this is the person that decides one day to do a great job and one day not to. They show up on time for weeks at a time and then they don't. It doesn't take long for everyone else in the department to notice this person chooses when to perform and when not to perform. And this affects the reputation of not only that person, but you. It affects morale, because by them not performing and holding up their end of the bargain on responsibilities and duties, they're letting other people down. Somebody has to make up that work. And unfortunately, very often the person that has to make up for their shortcomings during the course of a work day that they're deciding to mail it in, it's either going to be your other employees or you. And that's not the kind of a person you need to be dealing with. So you've got to go have that conversation. The disrespectful person, the employee who disrespects you, talks back to you, pushes back on you, rolls their eyes at you, all the multitude of ways that somebody is showing either disrespect for you or for their coworkers. The jumper. This is the person who goes running to mommy and daddy when they don't like the answer that you give them. So they go around your back. If you reprimand them, they go tattletaling to the boss, your boss, about it. And sometimes, and we're going to talk about difficult bosses in a later video, but sometimes your boss not having all the information and making the mistake I tell many bosses to avoid, and that's been suggested in previous courses, is they tend to protect this person for a lack of information, or because you're not having a difficult conversation with your boss to tell them that ain't okay. They cannot be doing that because that's a problem. Very common in the workplace is the consistently late person. And it's so easy because you're busy all the time. Is you know, Roy's late again. You know, oh, there's Sally, 15 minutes again. But you got things to do. You don't have time to go deal with it right now, right? You just gave them permission to be late again when you did not deal with it. There's a culture of accountability and standards that you always have to keep in mind and in place. These are the people that show up for meetings late or unprepared. And, you know, in the meantime, everybody else is waiting on this person to get there, show up. You're wasting company's payroll. You're wasting others' times, maybe your peers or your boss's time, because this person can't make it to a meeting on time. That's not okay. You've got to have the conversation. And again, we're going to tell you how to have that conversation shortly. The annoying employee. And we all have had those in our careers, and I certainly have had mine. And very often we disregard this annoyance and try to avoid them or put them in a position that minimizes the annoyance to you, but it may create more annoyance for others. I've certainly seen some managers go to the trouble of redesigning job responsibilities to account for people's poor behavior, that kind of annoyance, that they can't get along with this team, so we're going to put them on a team by themselves, sort of thing. Again, back to accountability. I discourage you from making these kind of exceptions or creating new rules for people, special rules for people because of their annoyance. You cannot avoid it. So here's the important thing. If you tolerate destructive or difficult behavior, it gives your employee the impression that it's acceptable. I know that's not what you want, but that's exactly what you're delivering. You cannot give them permission through your silence or your patience or your procrastination to continue to behave in the way that I've described in a handful of the previous examples, because again, it will never fix itself. You've got to have a culture of accountability. And the reason why they're behaving that way is you're allowing it, and because you are not implementing a level of accountability that prevents it. Once again, you don't want to be too hard on people, but you want to be fair with everybody. And for example, showing up for work or meetings on time. If 9 out of 10 people can show up on time for work or at a meeting or get their work done on time, et cetera, why can't this person? Why should others suffer? So you cannot allow them to continue doing this without a discussion with them. You've got to go address it. This pattern of behavior with your employees is accepting that behavior. And very often we have an inability to accept that. So there's many people that are working with you that they don't own their stuff. They take no responsibility or avoid responsibility for their mistakes, things they're doing wrong. They want to blame it on somebody else. Got to be careful with them, because everybody sees that. That is sometimes the most destructive of behaviors, because others who have a high level of accountability, you enforce that accountability, but this one person is getting by because when they do something wrong or inadequately or too late, not on time, and you're not dealing with it, everybody else sees that. Everybody's seeing that. The person that shows up for either their one-on-ones with you or showing up for meetings that aren't prepared. Oh, I forgot to get that report. Oh, did you want that today? Did you? Oh, gosh, I forgot. I thought that was next week. They come to meetings regularly unprepared, not having what they needed to have put together, ready to discuss. They're not getting their projects done on time. They rarely have the reports they need or can cite the reports they need. And again, you have not been firm enough with this individual. You've allowed them to continue to come unprepared. Again, this next one, passive aggressive, are the people who are very maddening, but they're so nice. Very often they're very nice people, and it's hard to get too worked up about them because they are so nice. But let me tell you, they're playing a game with you, maybe unconsciously, maybe it's not something they're doing consciously. There's a large portion of the population that has a fair amount of passive aggression in them because they don't want to, they're unwilling to say what's on their mind. They won't be honest with you because they don't feel it's safe or they have permission to be honest or question you or push back on certain ideas. We've talked about this in previous courses. They'll nod their heads and agree that they're going to go do something. Then you find out when you go inspect it that they have in fact not, and they'll give you some level of plausible excuse for not doing that. Your relationships with your employees have to be strong enough. If they're not going to agree, they're not going to follow through with something, They've got to question it before you expect it to be accomplished or executed. If you are continually coming across passive aggression with your employees, you have got to figure out why you're creating the environment that leads them to behave that way. Why aren't they being honest with you? Why aren't they questioning? Why aren't they giving you their opinions or feedback on this? If they disagree, you've got to create an internal culture with your team that they can give you that feedback, you are open and willing to listen to their opinions and thoughts. Because that's typically what's driving the passive aggression, is they didn't think it was going to work, or they don't think your way is the right way, or they think that there's some punitive outcome, or it's a change that they're not prepared to go make, that they don't understand the why behind why you want them to do things. I used to have a CEO that I admired very deeply, that every time he did a town hall with a group of employees, he might have 25, 50, 100 employees that he's doing a town hall with, and he'd always ask the question, and it was always uncomfortable and awkward when he asked it, but eventually we get things going. And I encourage you to think about how you can do this on a regular basis. Is he'd ask this question: what are we doing that's stupid? And people start looking at their shoes and looking at each other and looking down. Did he really just ask this question? And he said, no. You all are doing something every day that you turn into somebody else, or internally thinking, why are we doing this? This is so stupid. I don't understand why they make us do this. Gosh, this takes so much longer. If we did it this way, it would be so much faster, so much better. It'd be so much less work. Those things are going on with your team on a regular basis, I promise you. And in this case, Tom would just allow the silence to rest. And he'd ask again, come on, what are we doing that's stupid? And then finally, one brave soul would raise their hand and say to Tom, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, yeah, I don't understand why we do this. And Tom would say, well, tell me more. And very often the response was, well, that's the way we've always done it, which isn't a very good response. He would always ask, well, why do you think that's stupid? Do you have a better way? Often they did. And very often we would say, wow, that's a great idea. Let's look into that. Let's make sure that makes sense. Let's test it out and see if your way is going to work better. And we came up with all kinds of process improvements by asking that one question: what are we doing that's stupid? And we'd find better ways and better ways and better ways. But underlying all that, and to this point, is these passive aggressives now found that it was safe to challenge the status quo. That it was okay to question how they've been asked to do things. And the more you make it safe and clear that you're willing to accept their ideas, their opinions, their viewpoints, maybe even take actions. Sometimes they would bring up something that they felt was stupid, and it really wasn't, because there was a reason why, but they did not have that information. So Tom or I or somebody was able to provide the why behind that. And I got to tell you, it became less stupid real quickly. If it makes all the sense in the world if we do it that way, once they had that key element of the why. I've dwelled too much on this particular part of it, but it's really important, because that's frustrating to you, and it's sometimes frustrating to them. Is you've got to have that open, encouraging dialogue. Now, you've got folks that respond with anger. You cannot tolerate that very long, if at all. If they demonstrate striking back out, if they get frustrated, if for whatever reason they get too worked up and start yelling at another employee or raising their voice at you, I'm going to give you a quick tip on this is you got to get them away. You got to get them out of the room. You got to get them in private, but allow them to continue to vent. You know how to get somebody more upset? Tell them to calm down. Just let them go. Just let them go. Let them drain themselves, nod their head, ask them some questions. Let that mental energy dissipate and allow that venting. That's how you calm somebody down, because very often people get angry, very often, not always. Sometimes there's a mental issue, but very often people get angry and worked up because they just don't feel heard. So hear them out, listen to them. And once they've brought their energy level down, once they brought that anger down, and you've controlled yours, because that's another key point of all this, then you can begin dealing with that behavior. You're not going to tolerate it. You've got to let them know that outburst, that striking out, is unacceptable, and you will not accept it again, or there's going to be consequences. Going back to performance management in the previous course. But often, once they've been validated and listened to, now they'll listen with a whole different perspective. You try to argue with them when they've got this heightened emotion going on, they've got no ears. They have no ability to hear, because all they're doing, even if they're allowing you to speak, is waiting for the point to be able to come in and argue with you to make their point stronger. If you allow them to get it all out without you pushing back on them, as long as things aren't turning violent, then often their hearing turns back on, and you can have an adult conversation with them around what their issue is and redirect their thoughts, create some understanding. But most importantly, then you can start having the conversation around why their destructive behavior or anger is unallowable. We all complain from time to time, but the constant complainer, back to the annoying person, they're the ones that are always complaining about everything, but never offer solutions. And I'm okay with people complaining, and you should be too. I want to hear their complaints. But most importantly, I want their ideas or their thoughts. And this is how to deal with the complainers. Please do not complain to me unless you also have a solution. Do not complain unless you have a solution. Because these constant complainers can be a virus with the rest of your team. They create a team of complainers, because once again, you're allowing it. These are the sort of human behaviors that get exercised and increased when people are around others that are doing that. It's human nature. So you've got to stem it. You've got to quell it. And the best way to do that is let them complain. Be open to complaints, but also help them come up with some solutions. Redirect their minds and thoughts to be in solution-based versus complaint-based. But you've got to check it. And you know, these complainers too, very often, they just need, they're just have a deep need for attention. And okay, you know, different individuals have different levels of needs around that sort of thing. And you want to be able to help them as best you can. But if they're just complaining because they need attention and they're not ever interested in solving the issue or being part of the solution, well, that's a different conversation. We're going to talk about that in a future video. We're going to offer you the tool set, the step-by-step best practices to deal with that sort of thing. So in our next video is when we cover that. It's called SBI, Specific, Behavior, and Impact.